They didn't just leave you, they unmade you. Not with one final goodbye, but with silence, with inconsistency, with the cold, slow drift of someone whose body stayed, but whose soul left long before they had the courage to say it out loud. You felt it before you saw it, in the way their tone changed when you spoke, in the way they stopped asking questions, in how your name no longer made them light up, how your presence stopped being something they looked forward to and started becoming something they tolerated. They didn't leave, they faded, and they left you to make sense of a disappearing act that didn't come with an ending. And so you waited, for answers, for apologies, for a moment of clarity that never came. You held on to every almost, every maybe, every excuse they gave because letting go felt like admitting defeat. Because if you could just hold on long enough, maybe they'd come back to the person they used to be. Maybe they'd remember how you made them feel. Maybe they'd finally see your worth. But they didn't. They chose not to. And in doing so, they forced you to look at yourself through the lens of their neglect. And it changed you. You see, heartbreak doesn't always look like sobbing on the floor. Sometimes it's quiet. It's sitting across from someone who used to love you and realizing they don't see you anymore. It's waking up to silence where there used to be good mornings. It's feeling invisible next to someone who once made you feel like the center of their universe. And somehow that hurts worse than anger, worse than yelling. Because at least with anger, there's still passion. But when they stopped fighting, stopped trying, stopped caring, what they really gave you was clarity. And that clarity, as painful as it is, it's power. Because one day you're going to wake up and realize that the person you've been mourning wasn't real. They were a projection, a potential, a version of them that existed only in your mind. You fell in love with what they could have been, not what they showed you. And that realization will feel like betrayal. But it's the beginning of everything. It's the beginning of you no longer chasing the ghost of someone who never actually showed up. It's the start of your return to yourself. They left, or they stayed in body and left in soul. Either way, they're gone. And now it's time to shift, because what you do next will either keep you stuck in their absence or launch you into your own presence. This is the part where you stop grieving their departure and start reclaiming your identity. You take back every piece of yourself that you handed over in desperation, every part you shrunk to make them more comfortable, every version of you that twisted into knots, trying to keep them from leaving. You stop asking, "Why wasn't I enough?" and start asking, "Why did I believe I needed to prove myself to someone who never deserved access in the first place?" Because here's what they never told you. When people lose someone real, someone present, loyal, emotionally intelligent, they don't replace that. They don't just move on. Oh, they might pretend. They might post photos with someone new. They might throw themselves into distractions and tell themselves they're fine. But the truth has a funny way of sneaking in at 2 a.m., when the phone is silent, when the room is empty, when they realize they fumbled the one person who never played games. They'll remember you, not just what you looked like, not just the sound of your laugh or the way your eyes lit up when you talked about things you loved. They'll remember how you made them feel, safe, seen, chosen. And they'll realize they won't find that again in someone who only wants the easy parts of them, because you loved them through their darkness, through the confusion, the walls, the mess. You showed up when it would have been easier to walk away, and they let that go. That's a decision they'll have to live with. Not because you said anything, not because you retaliated or made some big dramatic scene, but because your silence is louder than any words. Your absence is more powerful than any confrontation. You didn't need to slam the door. You just stopped waiting for them to walk through it. And that silence? That's where your power begins to speak. This is where the shift happens. Not overnight, not all at once, But steadily, you start waking up a little lighter, breathing a little deeper, laughing a little louder. You stop checking your phone for their name. You stop comparing yourself to the person they're with now. You stop measuring your worth by how someone else failed to see it. Because you start seeing it yourself. You start pouring into your own cup. You start remembering the things you love that you let go of to make space for them. You reconnect with the parts of you that had nothing to do with them. The parts that existed long before they entered your story and will thrive long after they're gone. You stop chasing closure and start creating peace, and it changes everything. You're not bitter, you're not angry, you're just done. Done trying to revive something that was already dead. Done trying to convince someone to choose you when you've already chosen yourself. You realize that love shouldn't require that much begging. That real love doesn't feel like anxiety, confusion, or waiting for someone to remember your value. And here's where it gets beautiful. You stop rising from the ashes and start building something brand new. Not a return to the old you, a rebirth into something stronger, wiser, softer in some places, harder in others. You become the version of yourself that your younger self would have been proud of. The version that doesn't need validation to feel whole. The version that walks away when energy shifts. The version that no longer romanticizes red flags just because they come wrapped in nostalgia. Because now you know what it means to be chosen. And more importantly, you know what it means to choose yourself. You don't chase anymore. You attract. You don't beg. You embody. You don't compete. You exist in such full expression of your worth that the right people recognize it instantly, and the wrong ones are intimidated by it. And eventually, without trying, without planning it, without even thinking about it, they'll see you again. Maybe in person, maybe on a screen, maybe in a conversation with someone who knew you both. But they'll see you. And not just see you, they'll feel it, the energy, the glow, the evolution, the peace you carry, the joy that no longer has anything to do with them. And in that moment, regret won't just visit, it'll stay. Because they'll realize they could have been a part of this version of you. They could have walked beside you while you were becoming. But instead, they let their fear, their ego, their immaturity make the decision for them. They chose comfort over growth, safety over depth, and in doing so, they lost access to the most elevated version of you. But that won't be your concern anymore, because the healed version of you won't need revenge. You won't even need their apology. You'll just be busy building a life so rich, so full, so authentic, that the idea of going back will feel laughable. You'll realize that they didn't break you, they built the fire that forged you. So let them regret. Let them realize too late what they had. Let their silence stretch into years of wondering what could have been. And you just keep walking, keep rising, keep shining in the light they couldn't stand next to. Because this is your era now, the era of becoming, of healing, of power, of choosing yourself over and over and over again, until it's no longer a decision but a way of life. You're not someone they lost. You're the lesson they'll carry forever. There will come a moment when everything shifts. When you wake up and realize you're no longer waiting for their apology. When you stop hoping they'll come back and explain why they left. When you stop checking if they've seen your stories or noticed your growth from a distance. You'll realize that something in you has clicked, not with force or fanfare, but with quiet, permanent understanding. You've outgrown them. Not in arrogance, not in ego, but in truth. You've become too much for the version of them that once walked away. You've expanded. You've evolved. You've climbed out of the shell they were content keeping you in. And now you look around and realize that the cage was never locked. You just forgot you had wings. And when that moment comes, you'll feel peace. The kind that doesn't scream. The kind that doesn't demand closure. the kind that doesn't ache anymore when their name is mentioned. That peace is the final goodbye, the one you give yourself when the world never gave you the courtesy of one. And what about them? They'll pretend it doesn't hurt. They'll carry on with surface-level connections, telling themselves they're happier now. They'll post curated versions of themselves, hoping you see it, hoping you feel something. But deep down, they'll know. Not because you reminded them, but because life did. Because life always has a way of echoing the consequences of the people we let go too soon. They'll meet others, of course, people who smile the right way, say the right things. But they'll find that no one else listens like you did. No one holds space like you did. No one sees through them like you did. They'll realize that connection isn't chemistry, it's safety, consistency, and depth. And they traded all that for temporary comfort, for something easier, lighter, but never better. And while they chase distractions, you'll be chasing purpose. You'll be falling in love again, not with someone else first, but with yourself, with your discipline, with your peace, with your solitude. You'll find joy in the little things again. The sunrise, your favorite playlist, the way coffee smells in the morning when there's no anxiety sitting across the table. That peace, that's your reward for choosing growth over obsession. That's what happens when you stop trying to prove your worth and start embodying it. You'll realize your glow-up was never meant to make them jealous. It was always meant to remind you of who you are. You'll stop trying to become the one that got away. You'll become the one who got back up, the one who rose from the ruins, the one who didn't need closure because peace became the louder voice. And they'll feel it, that weight, that void, that regret, when they scroll past your face on a timeline and remember what it felt like to be loved with that kind of sincerity, when they hear your name in conversation and feel the air shift, when they go back through old photos, not to miss you, but to try and grasp how they ever thought they'd be okay without you. But you won't be in those places anymore. You'll have built new rooms in your life, ones they don't have keys to. You'll be loved, deeply, rightly, by people who didn't need to lose you first, to realize your value. People who recognize what you bring without you having to shrink, chase, or beg. Because you don't beg anymore. You don't explain your worth to people who are too emotionally immature to understand the weight of your presence. You don't dilute your intensity, your kindness, or your clarity. You speak softly, but your boundaries are loud. You don't chase attention. You attract it by being unapologetically in alignment with yourself. And maybe one day, when they're sitting with someone else, they'll notice the difference. Maybe that person won't ask about their dreams like you did. Maybe they won't hold space when things get dark. Maybe they won't see through the fake smile the way you could. And they'll remember you, not in bitterness, but in longing. Not with hate, but with quiet pain. And in that moment, they'll regret it. But you'll be long gone, because you're no longer a memory. They just haven't caught up to that truth yet. You've turned their rejection into a redirection. You've rebuilt your self-esteem without them in the picture. You no longer build futures in your mind based on people who had no intention of staying. You've become the one who doesn't hope they come back. You've become the one who hopes you never go back to needing them. Your life now is layered with purpose. Your heart beats differently, not for validation, but for vision. You've taken the pain and woven it into your ambition. You've turned heartbreak into habit, silence into structure, and doubt into discipline. You're no longer fueled by what they did. You're focused on what you're becoming. And here's the secret they never saw coming. The real power isn't in them regretting losing you. It's in you no longer caring whether they do. It's in you being so in love with your future, you forget to grieve what could have been. It's in the quiet confidence of knowing that what you offer doesn't come around often, and that whoever gets it next will have to work hard to be worthy of it. You're no longer someone who gives endlessly without receiving. You've learned the sacred art of reciprocity. You now understand that love without respect is manipulation, that chemistry without consistency is chaos, that presence without commitment is just proximity. You no longer accept half-loves or temporary fixes. You want peace, presence, and partnership. And anything less isn't welcome anymore. So let them watch, let them wonder, let them hear about your glow-up from someone else. Let them hear your name in rooms you never even entered. Let them feel the weight of the void they created. Not because you crafted a plan to make them suffer, but because you finally stopped waiting for them to realize your value and decided to become someone you could never walk away from. And when the day comes, and it will, when they reach out, even subtly, with a like, a message, a "how have you been?" you won't respond with resentment. You'll respond with restraint, not because you're still hurt, but because you've healed, not because you want to hurt them, but because you've outgrown the version of you that once thought they were home. Let them regret. Let them remember you not as someone they had, but someone they couldn't hold. Not as someone they lost, but someone they didn't deserve. And you just keep becoming. Become someone they can't access, someone they can't forget, someone they'll never get back, not because you're petty, but because you're powerful now. Because your value is no longer negotiable, because your heart is no longer for rent, because you finally realize that the best revenge isn't being missed, it's being untouchable. You were never hard to love. You were just too much for someone who never intended to love you properly. But now you're not just loved. You are respected, adored, chosen, first, every time, by people who show up, people who stay, people who don't need to be taught how to care. And you're finally the one doing the choosing. Because your story doesn't end with their absence. It begins with your return to yourself, to your purpose, to your power. Let their regret grow roots in the spaces they never watered. Let their memory dissolve in the light of your healing, and let your name be the one they remember every time they settle for less. Because you were the best, not just for them, but for yourself.